We'll get there shortly. All right, in the meantime, if you don't know me, my name is Kevin Regamey. I am creative director and co-founder at Power Up Audio here in town with Jeff Tangsock, who probably is not here. We celebrated 4 years last night, so I'm here. I figure at least one of us gets here. And Joey is here as well. Joey Godard's in our team. And it's actually his birthday today, so props to you, man, for being here right now. Yeah. Nice, here we go. Yeah, so we worked on games such as Towerfall and Necrodancer and Mushroom 11, Action Hank, Darkest Dungeon as well, kind of all around. Lots of sound and music stuff. So in the past, I've been on stage kind of being the guy talking about audio stuff, just like being the expert on stage. And I didn't really want to do that again. We already had this slide. We already said, hey, it's fine, we're going to carry on. So instead, I went around the industry and asked a bunch of sound designers and composers, what is the most interesting or most effective way you have used audio to contribute to a game's design? And by that, I mean anything beyond a simple paint job. So let's say like a dog barks in a game. You hear a dog bark, sure, but there's other sounds that can inform player behavior, or they can support themes in the game, or they can reflect changes in tone, that kind of thing. So I asked around, so starting with Erica Hampson, sound designer at Dodge Roll Games, working on Blubberbusters and Enter the Gungeon.
In Enter the Gungeon, we implemented directional audio with volume attenuation so players could better locate enemies and hazards in the heat of combat. Weapons that have to be charged by holding down the fire button would always have a wind-up sound that matched the charge time. That way, players can learn the audio cues for particular guns and items and use them more efficiently.
Pretty good, right? Never miss. All right. Next up is Jeff Van Dyck, sound designer, audio director, composer on Hand of Fate, Alien Isolation, Total War, and Assault Android Cactus.
In Assault Android Cactus, the player has a primary weapon as well as a strong secondary weapon that recharges over time. Similar to Erica's approach, we hooked up a simple beep sound effect when the secondary is fully charged, and this works great in terms of informing the player it's fully charged without forcing them to look at the HUD.
If you haven't played that, it's a perfect game. It's a perfect game. Doesn't happen very often. Jonas Turner from Finland, a good friend of mine, sound designer and voice actor on Badland 1 and 2, Downwell, Broforce, Environmental Station Alpha, and Nuclear Throne, among others.
In Nuclear Throne, I wrote a language for the inhabitants of this lovely wasteland. I used the language to tie characters and lore together, but to also inform the player of various things such as out of ammo or low health. And after some time of hearing the mutants scream similar sentences at similar events, you start to get accustomed to, oh, that means this and this. And it brought the world together in a cool, hey, I discovered this way. And just like in Assault Android Cactus, it helps the player not to be looking at the UI quite so often.
Thanks, Jonas. Next up, our birthday boy, Joey Godard. Sound designer at Power Up Audio, as I mentioned, on Darkest Dungeon, Viking Squad, Mushroom 11, and a host of others.
In Mushroom 11, the entire game's design is focused around the pruning and subsequent growth of the player character. It was important to identify what moments of growth were most relevant to the player, and to make sure those moments were emphasized in sound. In general, hearing the growth is more important if the mushroom is near full size, so we set up a dynamic system to suit. Quieter growth sounds when smaller, and louder sounds when approaching maximum size.
Good choice to hire that guy. All right, Hannah Gamiel, software engineer and audio engineer at Cyan Inc. on the recently released Abduction, the kind of spiritual successor to Myst and Riven.
In Captar, one of the worlds in Abduction, we created a huge chamber that has a gear mechanism centerpiece, which the player has to power on. It was crucial that we made the player feel as though powering on this machine was extremely pivotal and important for progressing through the world, but visuals just weren't enough to narrate this importance. The sounds we added to the machine really helped the player to feel that importance and to imagine how complex the machine must be on the inside and how each part seems to interact with something greater than itself.
Sorry for the spoilers there, that's how you do it. Matt Martinson at Clay Entertainment, in the past on Need for Speed Underground and NHL 4, as well as now at Clay, Invisible Ink, Don't Starve, Mark of the Ninja.
In Mark of the Ninja, I came up with a 2D occlusion obstruction system. Without having much of a system in place, the whole 2D stealth fog of war stuff would really break down. Audio needed to actively engage this core concept of stealth. And just like Joey with Mushroom 11 and Hannah with Abduction, I was looking to give meaningful feedback to the player about what was most important or relevant from moment to moment. In this case, the occluded sound of guards' movements and voices served to reinforce and sometimes even replace the visual information the player had when planning out how to tackle a given area.
I think Matt's here somewhere, yeah? Thanks a lot, man. Cheers. All right, next up, this dreamboat, Rich Vreeland, also known as Disasterpiece, sound artist. He's great. Worked on Fez, Hyperlight Drifter, Reigns, and Mini Metro. Won an award for it.
In Mini Metro, changing the audio parameters for a level actually changes the way the subway simulation runs. For example, the audio system controls the speed at which passengers embark and disembark from trains. That said, certain cities, like Paris, have passenger cars that hold less, so the audio design had to be crafted carefully so as not to imbalance gameplay. The takeaway here is that some gameplay design choices were able to be conceptualized with audio first, and then were later adopted by the rest of the game.
Yeah, Mini Metro actually beat Darkest Dungeon this year for the best audio in the IGF, and he totally deserved it. It's so good. Next up is Sean Lorish, who is co-founder and audio director at Capybara Games on Below, Super Time Force, Critter Crunch, a massively underrated title. It's so good, and Sword and Sorcery EP as well.
On the topic of audio first, the Trigon boss battles in Sword and Sorcery EP were sequenced and animated based on a song that Jim Guthrie wrote, as opposed to the other way around. By having the code keep the gameplay and animations in sync with the music, the overall feel is much more impactful. It's essentially a rhythm action sequence, but with gameplay that feels more like traditional combat.
Next up, John Robert Matz, composer, good friend of mine, working on Gunpoint, For the King, Rodina, and Fossil Echo.
In Fossil Echo, there's a sequence where the player character must use a ladder to scale a large portion of the tower. And similar to Sword and Sorcery and Mini Metro, this part of the game was tailored around the music, letting it form the basis of the level and art design. Unlike other similar vertical scrolling sections in the game, there's no time pressure or challenge, just the choice to ascend or not to. The designers gave me a basic outline of what the player character would encounter along the way, and then I was able to use that to write the score before the sequence was even sketched into existence.
I seriously wish we had time to watch that entire sequence. It's so goddamn good. It's like 3 minutes of you just climbing a ladder and you don't mind at all. It's gorgeous. All right, Brian Gibson of the recently released smash hit Thumper. Amazing game, right? Oh my god. It's out of control. You haven't played Thumper yet, like go home and play Thumper. Stay here and watch the talks first, then go home and play Thumper. All right, now Drool, check it out.
The interesting thing with Thumper was to make a music game, but have the gameplay interactions produce non-musical sounds. In other words, have the gameplay audio reflect the physical materials interacting, the scrapes, bangs, explosions, and then let whatever weird musicality emerge from that. For me, the emotions evoked by music are important, but it's just as important to sell a solid, tangible reality that the player can be emotionally invested in.
How sick is this? Are you serious? Oh, I had to follow that at the experimental gameplay workshop at GDC. It's like, how do you do it? All right, so Samuel Justice, sound designer on so many games, a lot of AAA stuff these days, but also Dear Esther, Amnesia, Machine for Pigs, Paragon now, Star Citizen, Battlefield 4. Like, his portfolio is stupid, and now Soma as well.
Mr. Munchie, did something go wrong?
I'm with Brian on this one. I think the most interesting thing we achieved with Soma was grounding this crazy story in a tangible reality, using sound. It felt like the only thing that kept the adventure somewhat believable was the way the team cleverly used the real world as the base for the soundscape, allowing the player to feel as though the world they're in is real and breathing. We achieved this by creating a special audio system wherein the engine would check the size of the room and the audio content would adjust to suit. The result was a sound in every space feeling different and real, right down to the player's own footsteps.
Brad Foch, audio naut at Phenomena, worked on Boom Blocks and now with Phenomena Luna and Watam as well, which I can't wait for.
In Watam, the goal has been to create an extremely dynamic music system that can mash up or remix the music of each individual character into a unique blend based on how they are connected. Much like Thumper and Soma, we were still looking to build out our world using sound, but in our case, this system reflected a core theme of the overall design, emphasizing how many unique parts can create a new and beautiful whole, while also being a fun and silly way to explore diversity and playfulness.
Right? Yeah, Brad was actually the last person to send me the materials for this talk, because he's in vacation, like in the Brazilian rainforest, and just sent it from the rainforest, I guess. It's pretty crazy. All right, so Darren Korb, audio director at Supergiant Games, famously of Bastion, and now Pyre, the upcoming Pyre, and Transistor as well.
Speaking of thematic emphasis, in Transistor, we knew our main character would be a singer who had lost her voice. We wanted to find a way to really put the player inside the character's head during our turn mode state when the player is planning out their moves. I had the idea to record humming tracks for every piece of music in the game that would play silently until the player entered turn mode. Then we put a low-pass filter on the instruments, turn up the spooky humming vocal, and voila.
That guy's been my hero for a long time. All right, Damian Mravunats from Crow Team, audio guru there and CMO as well. Worked on some music for Counter-Strike Global Offensive, the Serious Sam series, and the Talos Principle as well, one of my favorite games ever. It's fantastic.
Similar to what Darren did with Transistor, we used dynamic music as well, but in our case it was used to reflect a change in tone. The Talos Principle is generally a slow, calm, thinking type of game. But the last level, the Tower Ascent, as we call it, actually features an element of time pressure, sort of an electric storm, which is slowly rising and obliterating the tower as it chases the player. As danger closes in, the soundscape's intensity ramps up, actually, emphasizing a new and frightening sense of urgency.
Gordon McGladdery. Right? Yeah, studio head at A Shell in the Pit Audio here in town. Collaborates with Power Up often as well. He's fantastic. Good dude. Very supportive of the community as well. Worked on Rogue Legacy, Night in the Woods now. Fossil Echo, just like John wrote Matz. Brigador, thanks Hugh. A Duelist, the list, I can keep talking for a long time, but the things he's worked on, he's crazy prolific. And Fantastic Contraption as well.
In Fantastic Contraption, we completely discarded the concept of like a traditional soundtrack and instead made the building pieces in the game these highly dynamic musical instruments. And this not only improved the overall immersion and made for a more interesting and never repetitive soundtrack, but it also added something of a new like mini game to the experience and this cool concept of every contraption being its own unique instrument.
And shout out, of course, to Northway Games with that one. Thanks, Colin. All right, Austin Wintory. So, he's, do I have a blazer in this thing? Is it the middle one? I don't want to press anything. That one. He's that guy. I was like, this is the best photo you have? Seriously? He's like, it's the best one. Use that one. All right. Okay. All right, Austin Wintory, yeah. Banner Saga 1 and 2, Monaco, and now Tooth and Tail from Pocket Watch Games as well. We're working on that one. Assassin's Creed Syndicate and Journey, for which he received a Grammy nomination, and Sunset.
Thanks, Kevin. I feel the same about you. So similar to Gordon's approach, the music in Sunset is completely diegetic, wherein the source of the music is always present in the scene itself. The player is a house cleaner in an apartment in a fictional 1970s South American country in the middle of a civil war. And in our case, the score is these vinyl records that the player finds throughout while they're cleaning that they can choose to or choose not to put on and listen to. As a result, the score can be heard throughout the game or never heard once. It's not exactly the same as Fantastic Contraption, but it seemed to really work well for Sunset.
Thanks, Austin. Next up, Danny Baranowsky, also the best photo we had. Also insisted we use this one, so we're using this one. Composer at DB Soundworks, of course. Worked on Cannibalt, Binding of Isaac, famously Super Meat Boy, and Crypt of the Necrodancer as well.
So I didn't get nominated for a Grammy or nothing, but one time Ryan Clark came over to my house and we got drunk and I said, what if we make the shopkeeper sing? And Ryan was all, yeah, okay, sure, sounds good. And now there's a plush doll version of it that sings when you squeeze it.
He'll sing all your favorites. March of the Profane. Disco Descent.
Game design.
All right, thank you very much. That's the whole thing. Thanks to all my contributors as well.